Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our June edition of Root Cause Matters, where we'll be discussing job opportunities and how they relate to tackling childhood poverty around the state of Florida. I'm going to give just a minute here to let everybody get filtered in. I know we have quite a few participants this morning that are joining, so we'll get started here in about 15-20 seconds. But again, thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate it. All right, thank you, everybody. I'm going to get us started here, and I will say right off the bat, I'm going to give some information on the front end, just kind of the latest on where we stand in terms of the Equality of Opportunity Initiative, some of the latest movements and some of the opportunities to participate in some projects we have specifically related to understanding the state of job opportunities in Florida coming up. But on the back end, I will be giving you guys breaking news. I'll do my best news anchor voice possible, as we will have the latest job numbers coming out here within this hour. So I expect to receive those any moment, and on the back end of today's presentation, I'll give everybody an update of where we stand in terms of jobs in Florida. But if we go to the next slide, I just want to again thank all of our speakers today for joining us. We have a really robust conversation from a bunch of different viewpoints here of the state of job opportunities in Florida, what it looks like within businesses within the state of Florida, and keeping those individuals and those job opportunities, and where we head next. But if we head to the next slide.
Bright Futures has awarded over 950,000 scholarships. You could be next. We fund futures. Visit floridabrightfutures.gov to learn more. Bright Futures pays.
My apologies as well. I forgot to mention that this one is being sponsored today by Bright Futures and the Florida Lottery. So I do want to thank them for joining us on this conversation and allow them to offer some opening remarks. But again, I do appreciate that they are participating in this effort. We work very, very closely with the Florida Lottery and Florida Bright Futures when we look at a lot of the education work that we do here in the state of Florida. So again, thank you to Bright Futures, and I'd like to welcome an opening from Secretary Davis, who wants to, again, give his thanks to you all for joining us this morning.
I'm John Davis, Secretary of the Florida Lottery, and I am proud to lead an agency that is creating brighter futures for Florida students, families, and communities. We value the partnerships we've built with organizations like yours that share the lottery's commitment to education, students, and communities. And as the primary funding source of the Bright Future Scholarship Program, the lottery has helped nearly 1 million students reach their dreams of a post-secondary education. Now, while this is a huge win for our students in this state, we're not stopping until every student in every corner of Florida is aware of these opportunities and has the resources they need to be successful. Because together, we can build a brighter future for all. Thank you.
We appreciate Secretary Davis again's partnership, and if you have an opportunity, please join us at Learners to Earners, where Secretary Davis will be taking the stage. We'll talk quite a bit about Learners to Earners throughout this conversation today, but he is always one of the most impassioned and really incredible speakers that we have at that event. He spoke 2 years ago, and we're excited to have him back on stage again this year. So again, just wanted to set the stage on some of the work that we're doing related to the Equality of Opportunity Initiative, which focuses at the health of our communities, the opportunities that exist as we create pathways to prosperity for our children, and of course look at early learning in the state of Florida. So if we jump to the next slide, I want to thank those advisory board members, some of which are on the call today, but that not only fund this effort, but lead the strategic aspects of this effort throughout the entire year. If you're interested in learning what it takes to become an advisory board member or joining us in this effort, please reach out to myself or Zanani Johnson. Our contact information will be throughout the presentation today. The next slide, this is one of the latest breaking news pieces that we do have from the Equality of Opportunity Initiative. Just last week, kindergarten readiness scores were posted within the state of Florida, and we saw that only 49% of our kindergartners each year are ready for kindergarten. This is actually a 1% drop compared to last year, which is something that does concern us to a degree. But we were very interested and saw some hope in some new pieces of information that came to life. And that is, for the first time ever, we're able to track those that go through VPK, our voluntary pre-kindergarten program here within the state of Florida, versus those that do not. Now, VPK is available to all students throughout the state of Florida. I know there are many conversations around access to those programs or the hours that they are available, but we did see that 62% of those that went through VPK and completed it were ready for kindergarten versus 37% who were not. Again, not only does this underscore the value of VPK, but I think more deeply it underscores the value of getting children into high-quality early learning programs at a younger age. We know if we're starting education at 5 or 6 years old, we have started too late. More than 80% of brain development is done by age 3. More than 90% is done by age 5. So to really set a foundation for long-term educational success, we need to start earlier. So the Florida Chamber Foundation and both the Business Alliance for Early Learning and the Prosperity Project advisory boards will be looking at early learning robustly as we head into this next year and looking at the policy levers that can be pulled and, of course, the investments that can be made from the business and philanthropic communities. If we head to the next slide, another key piece I wanted to underline here is that we are getting ready to release a report here in the coming month that actually looks at the relationship between access to childcare or early learning and the economy as a whole here in Florida. Now, I'm going to ask that we all just keep this one a secret for the next month or so, because this is the first time this slide has ever been shown publicly, and it is just a summary of some of the statistics that will be coming out in that report. What we have found is that Florida each year loses nearly $5.4 billion in economic activity due to families and parents that are unable to access the job market. And what I mean by that is they are either at home with their child, they're having to reduce their hours due to their lack of access to child care, or they're having to find ulterior arrangements that affect their opportunity to improve their education or their job opportunities. And again, at $5.4 billion, that is one of the highest rates in the entire nation. There's a lot of other really interesting statistics that are going to come out of this report, but again, just something that we're keeping an eye on, knowing that access to early learning doesn't just impact our long-term workforce and talent pipeline, but it affects our job opportunities today. More to come there. Next slide, if we look here, something I just wanted to make you all aware of is that these statistics that we're putting out first come through the Equality of Opportunity Initiative. They are talked about on these webinars every month, but we actually have an entire research team that is updating tools on a daily basis. So whether you're using our gap map or scorecard, or if you're on Twitter, please follow our Florida by the Numbers account, where there are new statistics posted on the state of Florida, on the opportunities that Florida has to grow every single day. So please keep an eye on those. In the next slide, I kind of want to highlight an opportunity to get involved in some work that we're doing right now. We are hosting virtual employer focus groups on June 21st and 22nd for our Florida Workforce Needs 2.0 study. And this is in partnership with CareerSource Florida, but I specifically wanted to highlight it on this webinar because it is all around what are the skills needed to grow job opportunities here in the state of Florida. We're specifically focusing on 4 different fields of interest: IT, manufacturing, construction, and skilled trades, healthcare, and professional business services. So those are all QR codes to register for those virtual employer focus groups. If you or your business is interested in participating in those, please do let us know. And then my last little let you know slide before we get into the really interesting content of the day is, please, if you have not registered yet, make sure you're able to join us in about 10 days at our Learners to Earners Workforce Solutions Summit. I just got an email this morning that we're actually nearly sold out of in-person registration. So if you are interested in joining us in person, please do so soon, and please register soon. But of course, if you're not able to join us in person, please check out the virtual option that we have. Without further ado, I kind of want to get into the meat of this conversation. We have a ton of great speakers today. They're going to be talking about a lot of different aspects of this, but I'm really excited for our first conversation with Jim Miller. Jim is the president of Maximus and serves on our Prosperity Advisory Board. But more importantly, Jim is just one of the most thoughtful leaders that I've had the opportunity to connect with when we look at the strategy of not only how do we create job opportunities, but how do we keep people within those job opportunities long term? How do we provide them the opportunity to continue to participate in this workforce? And how do we as business leaders play our role in that? So, Jim, thank you for joining us. Jim is out in Denver, so it's a relatively early morning for him, so I appreciate you being on the call this morning.
Happy to be here, Kyle. Thank you.
So, Jim, you and I we had a prep call for this. We've just had calls in the past where we discussed this at great length. But I kind of want to just have like a level set, high level question on the front end. Maximus works across the country. You work with federal governments, you work with state governments. Give us your kind of insights or opinion on the state of the workforce across the country. What are some of those pain points? What's working well? And what are people saying on the ground?
Great. Well, first and foremost, thanks. This is a great, the Prosperity Initiative in and of itself is tremendous. So one of the first stare and compare activities that we can talk about is the difference between what the state of Florida is doing through this initiative in the chamber and what other people are doing. Florida should be proud of themselves. It's really unique what you're doing here, and the level of detail and the level of engagement is really, really spectacular. So, good on you. The first thing that I want to level set on is that government workforce policy grew out of, started with the Wagner-Peiser Act in the 1930s. It was always designed, so it went through, it's gone through different changes, and now we have the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, or WIOA, and TANF. But it's always had one driving principle, which is that there is a overabundance of unemployed people that are searching for a restricted number of jobs. The whole of the design of all of the government programs really starts with that premise. And that premise is now on its head. Okay, so we are now starving for employees, not having an overabundance of job seekers. And that's the first telling difference across the country, is that we have a perfectly imperfect workforce system. It was designed to solve a problem that we don't have. And so that's kind of the first key point across the country, is working with the local workforce boards of how, and with the federal government, how do we change this policy as we're driving the car down the road? Okay, that's easier said than done. As you all well know, the federal government does not work at a very rapid pace, except for when we have a public health emergency, obviously, right? We did some pretty good stuff in some short period of time. But I would submit that we're in that same situation for the workforce system and for employment in America. The demographics are clear. We're getting older. The workforce participation rates are changing. The pandemic return to work has been great in Florida relative to other places, but there's some challenges there, and you actually touched on one in the piece of data that you shared, which is childcare.
Yep.
And childcare and access to childcare is the single largest rate limiting variable to having a sustained workforce, because it's those, as an economist, which I am, would say, those externalities are causing the problem to the workforce availability that we've got. So those are some of the key differentials. Do we have sectoral challenges? Absolutely, we have sector challenges.
Sure.
You've got, and again, the last slide that you just showed, the 4 areas that you're trying to address, those are sectors that are experiencing particular problems. So those are, and then you get into wage and price and services, and the value of a service job and a career in service versus a career in something else adds to the complexity as we as employers to finding or attracting retaining, keeping, creating career ladders for people. Those are the challenges that we see across the country.
I love that, Jim, and you have given me like 5 questions now that we probably did not talk about that I want to ask you based off what you just said.
Sure.
You know, one is I kind of want to underscore that point of as a society, we tend to move fast when there are crises. We do not tend to move fast when there are opportunities. And we have this opportunity right now to completely reframe the way we do everything, whether it's workforce services programs to the education services that we offer on the front end. And I'm going to touch on both of those during our conversation today. The first point I wanted to bring up is that you talked a bit about how we have flipped on our head. And that is exactly true. I'm actually Everybody, this is the first new bullet that we will be given as I'm reading it live. There are 62 individuals looking for jobs in the state of Florida for every 100 open jobs there are. And I think we as people always want to segment that into we have a skills gap challenge, or we have not enough high-paying jobs challenge, or we have a this, we have a that. The reality is it is a combustion of many things. And, one of the pieces that you touched on is the fact that it is our child care crisis. It is our employability crisis. And it is a retention issue as well. So I want to ask that question right off the bat. As employers, as we're thinking about growing the pipeline, and specifically as we're thinking about taking those individuals that may be in this poverty situation or close to it, maybe an Alice family, a relatively lower income, how do we retain that talent? How do we grow that talent? How do we identify that talent for long-term success to ensure that we're not having to replace somebody year over year? We know how expensive and how challenging that is, but that we're growing our talent internally and building stronger teams.
That's a great question. The challenge that we've got is, again, a labor economist would tell you that we are, all of us all businesses are competing for the same talent. Okay, we're in a competition. So if you're in a competition, you've got to create, and we're all good at this, right? What's your value proposition? What's your unique selling proposition? We actually do a pretty good job of that generally, but that's the first level, which is, okay, is the work that you're doing interesting? Is the work that you're doing fulfilling? Is the work that you're doing going to create a stable economic environment for you over the long term? Those are some of the things that you have to start with. Those are the table stakes. Then from those table stakes, you've got to be able to act with 3 things. So clear intent, right? So what is your intent? And that's the first, those are the table stakes. My intent is to be a great employer. My intent is to be the employer of choice in this competition. Okay, great. Then how transparent am I? How is it that I am doing it? And can I see it? Most organizations are very opaque when it comes to how they're demonstrating their value statements. So being much more transparent in that storytelling is really important. And that's the story that of the individuals who work for you. I mean, those individuals have made a choice to work for you. So if it's their voice that's saying, hey, this is a great place, that's a really important retention activity. And then the last action is behaviors, is consistency in your behavior. You can't be saying one thing and doing another, because that's the first tell that gets you in trouble. So it's a real simple model. I'm a guy of 3s, right? So there's always 3 things in my world. Those are the 3 critical aspects to retention: is a clear and articulate value proposition, one that is transparently seen and seeable, and one that is consistently delivered on. If you do those things, you're going to be in a better position vis-a-vis the competition. Then how you do it becomes the real fun part, because the how is, we're all geographically based. So that's one of the issues, right? So we all have physical locations. That means, and this is why the Prosperity Initiative is such a cool thing, because it's zip code based. If you are understanding of your physical location and the demography and the ethnography of that
Yep.
arena, you're going to be better positioned to be understood by it and win in the competition. Those are the things that you've got to start thinking about in terms of, I'm competing for talent in a location. If I understand that location better than anybody else, then I'm going to be able to align my interests with their interests and sustain a more attractive place. Then I keep it up by behaving in that manner, by creating career ladders, by investing in the individual's ability to learn and perform, and investing in the whole of the unit, not just the individual, but the whole of that family unit, because most people have families. And that's where many companies tend to go, whoops, I focused on the individual, but I didn't focus on the whole unit around, support unit around that individual. And that's where the real differential comes from.
And I think there's such a clear connection between two of the points you've made there, which is one, this idea of asymmetric. I am so sorry. There it is, asymmetric information, and the fact that some of our families that are on their path to prosperity or are dealing with poverty or low income families, they don't get that very clear career path or that pipeline from their workplace. They're coming in with a job. They may not get a lot of training on what that job is from day one. They may not have a very clear idea of what their role looks like in 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And because of that, one, to your point, you may become not disloyal, but disenfranchised. It's just an organization that you don't want to work with. The other piece is that when you do the opposite of that, when you are very clear and concise and you are very transparent with your employees, you build trust with your employees. And when you build trust, you are invited into learning that information about their communities. You're invited into learning that information of what those struggles are at home and are away from the office. And that can inform how you treat employees. That can inform how you set up the workplace to better accommodate. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the holistic training that you guys do at Maximus, and I want you to talk about it from two different aspects. One, we hear all day like some of the hard skills that are needed, but what are some of those soft skills, or really we're moving away from that phrase, what are some of those like important personal life skills that we think employees can bring to the table and we can teach as employers, or maybe even our education system should be teaching? And secondly, what does that holistic training look like to support that family? Because I think that's a really important point that I want to hit on.
Sure. Well, I think from a holistic training perspective, it says, yes, there are job skills. And the economic bargain that you make with the people you hire is they're going to trade their time and their effort for an outcome that is beneficial to both of you, right? They get paid, you get a profit. That's the bargain. So don't make it over difficult. The holistic approach is everything has to be focused on the performance of that individual, because if I create a better environment for performance, I create better outcomes for me. It's as simple as that. Don't have to overthink it. So what are the factors that go into an individual's ability to perform? Well, your childcare is a perfect example. And that's an externality. If my child is sick and nobody is there to take care of them, or I have no access, guess what? I'm not going to work that day. I'm staying home taking care of my child. And if I delay, and let's go into this as an extension, if I delay the care to that child, let's say they've got a clinical problem. If I delay the care to that child because, I don't have insurance, then my ability or the frequency with which that problem is going to crop up increases. So these are the kinds of things when you say holistically, you have to say, okay, what is the totality of the problem? Yes, there are hard skills, but let's say, they've run up their credit card debt because they're not financially literate. Well, then spend a little time with some financial literacy training, or they don't do a very good job on budgeting, or they have food challenges and they're not able to stay as attuned at work because they're hungry. We talk about it in terms of kids ready for education. If they're hungry, they're not as good at learning.
Yep.
Guess what? You're not as good at working either. And if you're worried about these other things, then I'm not going to be as productive either. That's the holistic approach, Kyle, that we try and address. Is you surround what are the barriers, what are the drags on performance, and then address them sequentially.
Yeah, I love that because we see companies doing that with their higher wage employees. We see the tech companies doing that, these holistic wraparound services. And it's not to say they shouldn't, they absolutely should. But if you're thinking about greatest need, that may be the community that doesn't actually have access to those resources to begin with. So, Jim, we could talk for an hour. I want to end on one final question, and it is super open-ended. But if you were talking to a company or you were talking to colleagues and they were looking to improve their culture, and especially improve their culture as they work with these families on their path to prosperity, what would you suggest to them, knowing that Maximus has done a pretty good job in that respect?
Be open and honest. The more education that you get, and the more thoughts that are bouncing in your head, the smarter you are. Oftentimes you tend to overlook the simple stuff. And the simple stuff is, and you said it earlier on about trust, okay? This is a trust relationship. And if you position yourself up forward as trustworthy, and then you demonstrate trustworthiness in your behaviors, you're going to reduce the total cost of acquisition of that talent to you. And you're going to reduce the drag on performance because they're capable of being attuned to what the problem is during the day. And you're going to retain them because it's a safe and happy and healthy place for me to be. It's not overly difficult, but it's easy to say, it's hard to do oftentimes because of all of these pressure points and pull points that we have as businesses.
Perfectly said. It is an easy thing to do, but it can be difficult. And what we say around here is, I don't expect when you hire somebody that they make their job their life. And in fact, I hope that they don't. But when you hire somebody, if you build that trust in that relationship, you hire them, you don't hire their hours. I don't want somebody coming in and getting their 8.5, 9 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is a day. I want them for those 8 hours a day, because if you're hiring the right skill, you're hiring the right talent, and you're building that connectivity and that trust, they are going to excel and perform every day of the week. So, Jim, thank you so much. We're going to continue this conversation on other platforms moving forward, but really appreciate you joining us this morning to kick this conversation.
Great pleasure. Always enjoy it, Kyle. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Well, guys, looking forward to kind of just moving through it quick here and head into our next one. Really excited to bring to life a conversation with my colleague, Zanani Johnson, our Equality of Opportunity Coordinator, and our Business Alliance for Early Learning Advisory Board member, Tessa Lesage, who is the Director of Future Makers Coalition with the Collaboratory down in Southwest Florida. So, Tessa, Zanani, thank you guys for joining. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Excited to be here with you all. Once again, I am Zanani Johnson, a team member of our Equality Opportunity Initiative, and today I'm excited to be joined by Tessa Lesage, Director of Future Makers. Tessa, thank you once again for joining us, and I'm eager to get started with our conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so as we discussed today about creating job opportunities for underserved communities in the work of the Future Makers Coalition, do you mind just in the opening just telling us more about what Future Makers is and what you all do in the job opportunities arena?
Sure. So Future Makers Coalition is what is considered a local college access network. We're a collective impact initiative in Southwest Florida. We cover Hendry and Glades, 2 rural communities, and then Charlotte, Lee, and Collier counties, 3 coastal communities. And we come together around a shared goal of transforming the workforce by increasing the number of skilled workers in our region that hold credentials beyond high school to 55% by 2025. And we work cradle to career. We believe that the talent pipeline starts before kindergarten with early childhood education, but talent also depends on quality early childhood education and access to early childhood education and childcare services. What we do in terms of job opportunities is we are working to increase the number of skilled workers in our region, recognizing that about 58% of working age adults of our workforce here in Southwest Florida currently do not have the credentials that are needed to fill in-demand jobs. And they don't have those credentials for a variety of reasons. A lot of things happen in life that make it very, very difficult for folks to sometimes even graduate from high school, learn English, but also to earn the credentials that are needed to fill in-demand jobs. And so we are really looking at a systems level to figure out how do we remove barriers, change policies and practices to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to get the skills that are needed to fill jobs and have a high quality of life here in Southwest Florida.
Well, thank you. So as you all help to create that job opportunities pathway, what does creating those job opportunities look like, and how do companies help bring job opportunities to communities that need them the most?
So I think one of the things that we've been learning over the past 8 or 9 years is that you really do have to create pathways, and that learning has to be a lifelong endeavor, especially with the way that the way we work changes these days and how quickly and rapidly it changes. And so I think it is really important to create opportunities that exist while folks are getting training to move into new positions, and to ensure that there's a strong pipeline so that there are folks to move into those entry-level positions or middle positions as folks move up the ladder. I think also we've worked really hard to try to help our employers think differently about how they recruit and how they retain employees, and how they think about the way that they post jobs, and the way that their employees may have to try to juggle life while working. And we have some great examples of employers that are really trying interesting and new things here locally to see how we can start to fill some of those positions that are really chronically open, right? So for example, Lee Health is a great partner who's leading our healthcare system alignment sector strategy. And they've been piloting this earn and learn model, where they're hiring folks prior to them having the credentials needed to enter into those first level positions in healthcare, like certified nursing assistants. And they're hiring them before they have the credential. They're paying them while they get the training. And we're looking to see what that does in terms of getting more folks into the positions, filling our training seats that are available. But then also, what does that do with retention over time when you invest in a person that way? So that's one example of how we're sort of changing the way opportunities present themselves, given some of the challenges that we face here in our region and statewide and nationally.
So as we continue to, work in those underserved communities and help them create those long-term job opportunities and those educational pathways, what role do you think that plays in tackling Florida's childhood poverty and addressing early learning?
I think a lot of times when we're thinking about workforce development and job opportunities, we quickly shift to recruiting folks from outside of the area to fill jobs. And I feel like, that's one option, but it's also the most expensive option, right? So how do we really tap into the untapped workforce here in our region? And I think that the untapped workforce really has different needs than those of us who have more easily received the training that we need, the opportunities that we need, that have access to resources in our community and are able to get into jobs and move up in our careers. And I think that we have to take a really hard look at that in terms of what are the barriers that some folks are facing. And I think it's easy when you use data to see where those folks live, like, for example, in our rural communities, right? Hendry County often has the highest unemployment rate in the state of Florida. So what is it about our rural communities? What are the barriers that they face there that we can start to look at, at a higher level, and see how do we change the policies and practices that are creating those outcomes for us? And I think that's true for any underserved community. You know, you think about how you can get down to neighborhood level information, and we have a lot of neighborhoods that have very different outcomes than, you know, the neighborhood maybe right next door. And so I think that it behooves us from an economic standpoint to be thinking about what are the differences that the folks in those areas are facing that we can help to sort of overcome in order to fill jobs, right? I mean, this is about economic resilience as much as it is about individual prosperity and changing generational poverty. Both go hand in hand, and we have to do both simultaneously. And I think that we can't always look to recruiting other people from outside of the area. It's the most expensive way to do things. If our system works well here, then we have an abundance of opportunity in our workforce that exists. But right now, the system seems to be not producing the outcomes that we want. And so what do we need to do to change the system so that everyone has the opportunity to get the education and training that they need to fill in-demand jobs and to end generational poverty?
Exactly. I completely agree. It's really about making sure that individuals not only know about the opportunities, but also know that they have within themselves enough to do it. So what strategies do you all have for reaching those populations outside of just the data?
Yeah, so we actually, Future Makers works at a systems level. So we typically work with partners who are working directly with individuals, whether that's, students in pre-K to 12, people going to, FSW or FGCU or some of our other higher ed institutions or technical colleges. But when it comes to recruiting folks that may not be thinking about going back to school because it's too overwhelming for them to even consider something like that because of just life in general. We've been piloting and have now, deeply embedded a program called Graduate Southwest Florida, which is a program made up of navigators who are individuals that walk alongside adults that need to reconnect with education in order to fill in-demand jobs and get into a well-paying job to change their lives and the lives of their families for generations to come. The navigators receive referrals from all different sources. It's a very open source, free service that we provide, leveraging the partnerships and the relationships that exist within the Future Makers Coalition. So any school could refer somebody, like if someone's at risk of stopping out because they're facing challenges, they could refer. An employer can refer if they have folks that they want to move up in their organization. But then also nonprofit organizations can refer for folks who are struggling to make ends meet and are interested in maybe finding a longer term solution to that. So we're taking all of those referrals and those individual lived experiences and the effort that it takes to help support folks in reaching their goals, and then compiling that information to find where there are big challenges, many people facing the same experience, and that tells us where we need to focus on system level issues. Right. So we've done some unique things that we have been able to implement between a variety of funding sources, including philanthropy, to address some of the problems that we see a lot of people are facing as they try to come back to school or finish a credential and get into a well-paying job. So we take those individual experiences and try to then not just make that for that individual, but bring it up to a higher level learning experience to help address systemic issues.
All right. Well, thank you, Tessa. If you don't mind, I saw a question in the chat. So they asked, do you track the success of the participants of the program post initial hiring of them into entry-level roles? And if so, what does this process look like?
Yeah, so we are committed to tracking individuals. I think the program is still fairly new, so we don't have folks that have been either all the way through the system or have been in their jobs long enough to really know what the overall effect is. But we do believe that by walking alongside them, we're supporting our employer partners, as well as the individuals that we serve. So like, for example, we're working really closely with the Department of Corrections right now to look at second chance hiring opportunities. And having that navigator to walk alongside an individual, I think, is a value add for the employers who may be kind of thinking like, is this a place that we want to try to pull workforce from or not? And then we're sort of there as the backup. We are leveraging our relationships with employers so that we're ready as more and more folks enter into the workforce to understand how it goes. But we are seeing individuals who really didn't even finish high school, complete certifications, for entry-level positions, maybe in healthcare. And now, because of the success that they've realized by getting by getting their GED and a credential, now they're ready to move into higher level positions, pursuing a bachelor's degree to become an RN, to really move up in their careers. And I think that level of empowerment that we're seeing from folks who didn't think they could ever even consider going back to school, more or less getting into an actual career pathway, is really promising. But guaranteed, we run on data, so we'll keep tracking, and hopefully in a year or so we'll have some good information about how that long-term impact is affecting our workforce here.
Well, thank you so much, Tessa. This has been a great conversation, and we'll keep tracking that data along with you all. And so thank you so much for joining us. And for our audience who would like to follow up with you and get in contact, how can they reach you?
You can reach me at my email. If you want to visit futuremakerscoalition.com, there's an info email at the top that you're welcome to send an email to. But my email address is tlesage, and it's LESAGE @collaboratory.com. But you can definitely email the info at the futuremakerscoalition.com, and you'll be able to get in touch with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Tessa.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll be hearing from the Overtown Children and Youth Council's Anthony Robinson, moderated by my colleague, Kristen Jordan. But first, let's take a look at one of Overtown's initiatives.
Well, work readiness is important because they are the future workers and professionals and owners, and to have this skill cultivated very early, meaning being on time, learning how to dress, learning how to communicate, but most of all, having some goals that connect to that.
It's important to me because you always have to be ready to do anything at your job or anything at all. Also, work readiness does wonders for you in the long run. Any type of job that you want to go to, you're going to have to be work ready. So I guess this work readiness workshop is good overall.
I feel like it's very inspirational, especially for younger kids. I think this is something that not a lot of children get to do. You don't get to go out and dress nice and have events and meals and at a nice hotel. I think it's nice to do things that is a little bit out of the ordinary for them so they can get a taste of what they really deserve.
I was wanting to, heighten my career readiness because that is something I haven't really practiced for. And I feel like this event here right now, sponsored by the Overtown Youth Coalition, will really allow me to better prepare myself for the professional world.
Events like these are important for the community so that people are able to take advantage of it, because some students don't know what to do or how to get there. So this would be a great way to at least start off on the right foot.
I want today's youth to leave here saying, you know what, this is not an opportunity, but this is my opportunity to take advantage of everything that I've gained, everything I've learned, everything that's been poured into me, everything I've heard. I want them to leave here totally inspired and excited to be the boss of their life.
being a boss means like taking accountability for your actions, like not just managing or telling people what to do, but also like being recognized.
I think boss moves is that you are able to be in charge of your own life and what you want to do, not necessarily following someone else's orders.
The way that I'm representing being a boss of my own life is really just by taking control of my emotional health, my spiritual health, my physical health. So I think it's important that you put yourself in positions to grow and just that personal development, making sure you're doing the right things with your body and working out, drinking water, just the basic things that we hear all the time, but it takes a long way. So being the boss of your life, I believe it's really taking charge, not waiting for someone to give you a handout, but going and take it and getting it out of the mud.
One way that we help students to realize that they are the boss of their lives, letting them know that there's nothing that can stop them from being able to be the boss of their lives. There's no barrier, because we do specialize in assisting youth that have barriers to employment, to overcome those, whether it be for funding or if they're needing a opportunity to be able to reach those goals. We don't allow any barriers to stop us from being able to do that.
Being the boss of your life is very important. Understanding who you are is even more important. And we're thinking we want you to boss up. And that's our theme, that's our word for the day. Boss up. And when you boss up, you're gonna be in control. Be the boss of your life.
All right. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this morning. I am Kristen Jordan, and I work on the Equality of Opportunity Initiative with Kylan Vanani. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Anthony Robinson, who is the Executive Director of the Overtown Children and Youth Coalition in Miami. Anthony, I think they say they saved the best for last, so you gotta kill it right now.
Looking forward, and thank you, Kristen.
Yes, thank you for joining us. And I'm excited to talk about the work Overtown is doing for our youth in Miami. So to start us off, can you just tell us a little bit about Overtown and help us to understand, the work you guys are doing in the job opportunity space?
Again, thank you all for this opportunity and being able to share with you all what we're doing in the Overtown community here in Miami, Florida. And I think our video, it gives a complete overview of who we are and what we're trying to do. And that is to make sure that our kids, our young folks, are becoming the boss of their lives and just encouraging them to boss up. Overtown Children and Youth Coalition is a community-based organization that was founded by the community. Back in 2012, at the time, Commissioner Spence Jones, City of Miami Commissioner Spence Jones, along with the stakeholders in the Overtown community and the nonprofit organizations in the Overtown community, wanted an infrastructure that will allow the Overtown community to be able to provide services to the families and the kids in the Overtown community. But what was happening was the resources wasn't coming in. So they created the infrastructure, which has now become the Overtown Children and Youth Coalition, that will allow the anchoring organizations to receive the support they need in order to provide services. One of the things that was happening in the past was organizations were coming into Overtown, utilizing resources, providing services, and then when the resource was over, they were leaving. So we created Overtown Children and Youth Coalition as a way to make sure that those services, those resources, those organizations stay within the Overtown community. The mission of the Overtown Children and Youth Coalition is, through a collective impact model, Overtown Children and Youth serves as the backbone to support the Overtown's anchoring organizations to empower the community youth and their families to reach their full potentials. We accomplish this through a collective impact model. And our collective impact model and what our thoughts, our model is, and how we move that forward is, we're just a network of community organizations, stakeholders, business owners, residents that are advancing and learning together, aligning and integrating our actions to achieve population and system level change. because we understand and realize in the Overtown community, which is in the Miami-Dade County, which is the poorest community in Miami-Dade County. So we're looking to see how we're going to make those changes. What are we going to do to be able to make sure that the young folks that are currently living in Overtown, they're going to be able to live, work, and play in the Overtown community as the Overtown community is making these changes. So through our collective impact model, we focus on the 5 key components of a collective impact. And the first one is a common goal and objective. And we have 3 focal points that we focus on. Now, within those focal points, there are a lot to unpack in those things, but we're going to share with you a little later on how we unpack those things, so it doesn't seem as if we are a buffet of everything that's on one table. So our focal point area is academics. Our other area is health and education. And then we also focus on youth workforce development. The other thing we do with through our collective impact is share data and measurements. So we bring our resources together and our data together to make sure that our actions, the work that we're doing, our efforts are aligning with the outcomes of what we're trying to accomplish. And actually we're trying to accomplish are mutually reinforced actions and activities that we're doing. So it's not just each organization is doing its own thing, but all organizations are working aligned with each other to support each other to carry out the overall mission of what we are trying to accomplish, whether it's in our academics, whether it's in youth workforce development, health and safety, or even through collecting the data through our accountability efforts that we're having. And then we do that. Also, what we do is continuous communication. So how we make sure and what we do to ensure we have continuous communication is through our efforts, we have created committees. And those committees have initiatives that they are designed and they are tasked to accomplish. And then they have to go out and work those initiatives out. So we have our health and safety committee that focus specifically on health issues within the parks, making sure that the parks are open, making sure our pools are open, making sure that our youth, and not just our youth, but also our senior citizens, everyone in the community have access to utilizing the parks. And then also taking on other health initiatives to make sure that our young folks and that our families are healthy. We talked a little bit about the food deserts that are going on, that are throughout the state of Florida. Overtown community is a food desert also. So we focus on making sure that nutritional opportunities are available for our families and our young people in Overtown community. Another one of our committees is our youth, our productive and working committee. And that committee focused specifically on youth workforce development and making sure that opportunities are available so that our youth can be able to have that foundation to be able to fill those jobs that are going unfilled going on each year. Kyle mentioned that for every 100 jobs, there are only 62 individuals that are able to apply for those jobs. So there's that gap that's taking place. So our goal through our youth workforce development program, through our working and productive committee, our role and our goal and our initiative there is to make sure that our young people have those skill sets, that mindsets, and that the training that's needed in order to fill those positions. And then we have our education and community engagement committee. And that committee focuses specifically on making sure that our young folks are proficiency academically, whether that's in literacy and numeracy. And I do want to share some numbers with you as we go on about how the efforts that we are making to make sure that the young folks that are coming out of the Overtown community are learning at a proficient level. It's simple. In Overtown, at the Overtown Children and Youth Coalition, our model, we are a collective impact model. That's who we are. Our work are geared and centered around making sure that the resources are connecting with the organizations so that those organizations can do their work, but doing it in a collective manner, not organizations working in their silos, not organizations doing their own thing by themselves, but working together sharing our resources, coming up together with mutual activities that support each other, collecting that data from all of our organizations, having continuous communication to show where our efforts are, how our efforts are being successful, and where those efforts need to change. And Overtown Children and Youth Coalition is that backbone organization that manages the collective to make sure that all of these things are taking place.
Okay, so and I think I said this last time we spoke, it's safe to say that Overtown serves almost like a multifaceted resource channel for the youth in Miami and just communities in Miami as a whole. So as a resource channel, how does Overtown's work relate back to, Florida's childhood poverty and academic performance and those early learning initiatives that, we talk about here at the foundation? And you mentioned that you guys have those education initiatives. How does that all work back together?
It ties back together through our initiative. So one of the things that we do, we are part of the community. And I think this is the thing that helps us and separates us from a lot of the other organizations, the programs or things or coalitions or collaboratives or even consortiums that are happening across the state, is that everything that every organization is a part of the community. We live in this community, we work in this community, we play in this community. So we are actually stakeholders in the community. And because of that, it allows there to be a trust factor throughout the community that allows us to be able to reach individuals and to reach the families. The families feel supportive. Families feel safe to say, I know my kid is a part of this with an organization as a part of this coalition because they are here. All of our anchoring organizations have been in existence in the Overtown for community no less than 20 years. So that support is there. So I think it starts off with that by being rooted, being a foundation within the community. And then from there, it allows our community builders. We use a lot of community builders. It's not just the experts, the individuals that are doing the work, but if you say it's a collaboration, which also includes those individuals, those residents who need the services, having them sit at the table with us, having them be a part of these committees so that their voices and their opinions are being heard, because they then allow us to let us know where their pain points are, what issues they're actually experiencing, and then we're able to, with their input, create the solutions to make it happen. And those things have helped, and those things have worked. When we talk about our literacy proficiency levels in the Overtown community, at the beginning of the school year, our proficiency levels in Overtown were at 29%. Through one of our partners, Care Elementary School, when the numbers came out 2 weeks ago, the school is at 80% at literacy proficiency level. So what we're doing now is we're taking that model of what we've done at Care Elementary, and now we're going to be going to our other organizations and being able to share that resource. Again, we're leveraging our resources from what they're doing at Care. Overtown Children and Youth Coalition, we're leveraging the funding to be able to support those organizations so that our young people over at the Optimist Club who are participating in sports programs. So before they go to practice, now they will have to come over to Care, spend that time with Care doing study hall to be able to make sure that they are proficient to be able to move forward in their careers. Or with the organization that you saw that did our film, that was also by one of our organizations that we support, Urgent Inc. So those young people are able to they will have to now come and participate in these academic components in order to be able to participate and move forward in those areas. It's about teaching, not about giving our kids a piece of fish. It's not even about teaching them how to fish. It's about teaching them how to own the pond so that they can then be able to feed generations of individuals.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we near the end of our time here, Anthony, I just have one more quick question for you. Why should nonprofits and private companies and businesses care about youth job opportunities and, providing those gateways to escaping childhood poverty and improving reading scores in our young learners? Why should they have a vested interest in that?
It's simple. I mean, if you don't invest now, it's going to have a tremendous effect on the workforce in the future. When we continue to look at the job numbers that they come out, when we look at what I'd say we do this, not just look at it on a national level, on the state level. Let's look at it on a zip code by zip code level. Let's look at it from a community by community level. And that's where we really see and figure and realize what type of improvements we are making, or if we're even making improvements. Because when we talk about the Overtown community, although individuals are getting jobs, but we understand and we realize that the opportunities still are not where they need to be. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So it is going to be crucial for our private companies and our not-for-profit organizations to come together to have an interest in our young people, in their proficiency level in reading, and also in childhood poverty. But then this is also why the value of this collective impact, how it works, by bringing in our private they are too a part of our collaborative, because they bring those resources also. Because at the end of the day, our private companies, our employers, they too are clients. And we need to make sure that we are preparing our young people, preparing their parents to be able to fit the needs of what they need as employers, so that we can be able to reduce our childhood poverty to under 10% by 2030, to be able to make sure that our goals are accomplished.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we have unfortunately reached the end of our segment. This won't be our last time speaking. So thank you, Anthony, and thank you to all of our speakers for just enlightening us on the role that your organizations play in uplifting our youth. So I believe I will now pass it back to Kyle with some breaking news, I believe.
Yeah, everybody, I know we are at the end of our time, so I will keep it relatively brief. Again, thank you, Anthony, and thank you to all of our speakers. One last note on our next slide. Again, if you're able to join us on June 27th, we'd love to have you, and I'll show a QR code for that in just one moment. As I mentioned, we are getting the latest data in right now, so I want to give a few high-level points. Unemployment rate in Florida has remained unchanged this month. We are still at 2.6%. However, the number of unemployed individuals has gone up slightly. Somebody may ask, how does that math square out? Well, we saw our labor force participation rate increase slightly here in the state of Florida. It's a good thing. It's at 59.4%, which is relatively low compared to other states, but we know we have an aging population, as Jim and I talked about at the front end of this conversation. That compares relatively favorably to pre-pandemic numbers. In February of 2020, we were sitting at 59.5%. Again, that labor force participation rate has not decreased coming out of COVID, quote unquote. I know there is the great resignation that everybody has talked about. Here in Florida, we've been experiencing a decline in our labor force participation rate since the recession, the Great Recession, actually. So again, good to see that number increase a little bit, good to see people getting back into the market. Over the past year, we have added quite a few jobs. I want to pull the exact number up here, 346,600. And more importantly, 9 of our 10 major industries have increased in the number of jobs they have added over the past year. The one industry that didn't is information. We're still doing a little bit of digging into why that's the case, but we're noticing a trend here and noticing a pattern here when it comes to information, and sometimes we're noticing it in the finance and professional services sector as well. We suspect that those figures were a little bloated from coming out of COVID. We know the tech industry, we know the information industry had a rapid growth. They were trying to capture on potential that they saw in the market. That potential was not realized in all cases. So that could be why we see a decrease in that figure. So those are kind of the two major points coming out of it. Again, check out the floridascorecard.org if you want to see these statistics for your county, your community. And then, of course, as Anthony noted, we need to focus on this stuff at a zip code level. So please check please check out the FloridaGapMap.org if you want to see what job opportunities and the percentage of individuals working within each field look like within your individual zip code. Just check out job opportunities on the Florida Gap Map, and that'll show you so. Again, I did tout it here, but if you are able to join us either in person or virtual, we would love to have you at our Learners to Earners Workforce Solutions Summit coming up in just a little over a week. If we head to the next slide, I just want to finally thank those speakers again that joined us this morning. I'm just in awe every month on the incredible lineup we're able to put together, the conversations we're able to bring to life, and most importantly, some of the growth we've been able to accomplish. So really excited about that. If we are, quote unquote wrapped, if you want to stick around, I'm going to answer some of the questions that came here in the chat here. Jerry, I did notice you asked about the current immigrant labor shortage directly impacting Florida's labor force. Unfortunately, it's a tough question to answer because we don't actually have great data on it. What I would tell you is that we have 62 individuals looking for jobs for every 100 open jobs we have here in the state of Florida. So obviously, the more talent that moves into Florida, the more resources, the more labor that moves into Florida would be a net positive. But what I will tell you on top of that is that the immigrant labor shortage, oddly enough, would probably impact Florida less than it would other states. The reason for that is Florida is the fastest growing state in the nation, with more than 1,000 individuals moving here every single day. Look at driver's license exchanges last year. We had, I think, nearly 560,000 individuals that moved to the state and just exchanged their driver's license here. Not everybody that moves to the state of Florida will be looking to fill a job. Some are moving with jobs. But that being said, there is a lot of talent moving here. As Jim and I kind of talked about on the front end, when we talk about our labor shortage crisis, we're dealing with a lot of different factors. Immigrant labor may be a piece of it, but there's a lot of other pieces as well when it comes to access to childcare, when it comes to skills match, when it comes to wages. So a lot of pieces that we're looking at. Anthony, I see you are already answering Don's question as well. So I appreciate that. And then I see, I not to put you on the spot for two things at once, but I did see you got another question on how is, Overtown's Youth Coalition partnering with birth to 5 populations in the early education space. So
say it again, Kyle, did I hear you?
Yeah, so it's asking how Overtown Youth Coalition is partnering with birth to 5 partners in the early education space.
That is under our health and safety initiative. That is one of our top 5 priorities in that space. So we're partnering with University of Miami, Ideas for Us, their Ideal Consortium to tackle that. We have another partnership with the Women's Fund where we're addressing those issues. We're moving into our second phase of that. Our first phase was literally going door to door, taking surveys from our child care providers and also from families that are of mothers and fathers of young people from birth to 5, to figure out where their pain points are, to figure out where were the roadblocks that were keeping them from having childcare. We've included those conversations with the child care providers because they too were experiencing a lot of pain points also, whether it was staffing, whether it was funding. As we said earlier, when it comes to the cost of child care, it's not that all these child care providers want to charge these high costs, but it's because of cost of living even for themselves. The regulations and the different things that they are experiencing that's causing their supplies and their equipment, that's causing them to charge these high rates. So we're in that process of moving to phase 2, which would now we are talking and strategizing on those solutions so that we can roll out phase 3. We're looking to roll that out sometime in January of 2024 to be able to bring and provide and make sure that childhood education, child care providers are able to provide services to the Overtown community.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. And everybody, thanks everybody who stuck around for overtime for some of those questions. We really appreciate it. Again, if your question didn't get answered here, please feel free to reach out to our team here at the Florida Chamber of Commerce, either Z Johnson at floridachamber.com or K Baltic at the Florida Chamber, or I'm sorry, at flfoundation.org. Either one will get to us, and we'll continue to answer these questions in real time, or we'll make sure we have them noted for our next webinar. Hopefully, looking forward to seeing a lot of you at Learners to Earners, and thank you again to all of our speakers and attendees. It was a great conversation this morning. Have a good one, everybody.